focus on when we're thinking about diet and how we can support our health through it is think about the season that we're in. And this is really the easiest, most just like straightforward way of supporting your health. And also, I think the tastiest, because usually the things that are coming about at those different times of years are the things that we'd be craving anyway. It's just kind of amazing how nature makes that work. So, eating seasonally and then also eating locally. So learning about those traditional foods in your region, that way you can balance out those environmental pressures. And here in this picture is prickly pear. This is out in Arizona, near Sedona area. And, I lived out there for herb school when I studied at the Southwest School of Botanical Medicine with Michael Moore. And, nopal, which is, fillets of these cacti leaves, is a really common traditional dish. It's cooling, it's moistening. And doesn't that make sense when you're living in the desert where it's hot and dry? They'd make lovely like prickly pear wine out of the fruits. And that color, again, is signifying antioxidants, which are cooling and take out inflammation. And I mean, how perfect and important, when you're living in the desert. So, working with those local foods, working with those traditional cuisines, or at least learning about them to get clues on how to stay healthy where you are living. It's a super important part. And this is just a fundamental, this is the foundation really of good health. And so, we always say this: food is medicine, food is medicine. And so why? And so this is what I think the why is. And if you have taken some of my seasonal classes, like the spring class or the summer class, you've probably seen some of these slides here. But I think it's because of coevolution. I think that humans evolved right alongside the plants. And throughout those millennia, throughout those years and years and years and years and years, we relied on the plants for everything. That is the reason we're here now, is because those plants were there for us. They were our food, they were our medicine, they were our shelter and clothing. And those plants were evolving and living in the same environmental setup as we were, right? We were dealing with, lots of storms, and they were dealing with lots of storms. Or we were dealing with certain kinds of pathogens, and they were dealing with those same pathogens because we live together, because we're neighbors. All the same climate patterns, all the same droughts, and these days, all the same pollution. And so because we're all dealing with the same stuff, that means that we're able to utilize all the things that they have, created for them to survive those problems. And because that we have been using these plants to survive all of those problems for all these years and all these years and all these years, like our bodies totally recognize these phytochemicals. Like we get it. We put the nettle into our mouth and our body understands what to do with those nettle compounds. And then I bolded this little concept here that like, because we have co-evolved with these plants, and we're just easily, ready to take healing cues from the phytochemicals in these plants. This is also seen in our senses, and the fact that our senses are actually adapted to seek out and recognize those phytonutrients in those plants. So we're going to see that color representing those specific antioxidants that our body needs. We're going to smell those aromatics representing those antimicrobial and digestive components that we need. I mean, this stuff is just so cool. It just gives me shivers. So I'm going to use some big words for a second here. I'm going to talk about secondary metabolites. So first, talk about primary metabolites. These are the building blocks of life. And I've already used some of these words today: carbs, fats, proteins, etc. We need these things or we die. This is what everything's built out of. But then you've got these secondary metabolites. And these are what, are helpful with all of these other nuances in our lives. This is what helps us to be vital and to flourish. Secondary metabolites, these are phytochemicals that help plants communicate help plants defend themselves against diseases and pests. And so I've given some examples of secondary metabolites: flavonoids, aromatics, alkaloids. These are terms we actually talk a lot about in medicine making when we're trying to extract those things, right? So plants have all these groovy secondary metabolites, and they have helped these plants survive, right? And so, we're kind of borrowing that. We're like, all right, you plant, you made all of these incredible aromatics, and it allowed you to, stay alive and defend yourself against maybe this fungus that was trying to kind of move in on you, or this, bacteria that was kind of moving in. And so you produced kind of an abundance of this aromatic to keep yourself healthy. And so, now we are able to ourselves use that aromatic to keep ourselves healthy, and as an antifungal and as an antimicrobial. So I've said here on this slide, these same phytochemicals can be used to stimulate our immune system for their antimicrobial effects, to soothe inflammation, to calm the nerves, and oh so much more. So phytochemicals are where it's at. If you study herbal medicine, you are studying phytochemicals. You are studying secondary metabolites. This is the thing. But what's extra cool is that these secondary metabolites also affect the flavor of our food. Like, different metabolites have different flavors. And there's research out there, because they've been looking at this, which shows that the fact that we prefer certain flavors and seek out certain flavors is probably something that's come about through evolution because of what our nutritional needs were. And so this is also going to point out to us that as herbalists, we've got to taste our medicine, because this is part of what lets us understand how it's going to function in the body. If we taste that sweetness, we're like, okay, that is going to nourish and build. If we taste that bitter, okay, that's going to help detoxify. If we taste that sour, okay, that's going to, be anti-inflammatory and cooling, right? Look at all those secondary metabolites. This is a picture from the radical herbal gathering that happened in London a few years back. So here's a little quote that I think sums it all up, and I'll try to make sure this is in your resources. The link to this article, the name of the article was "Plant Volatile Compounds: Sensory Cues for Health and Nutritional Values," and Science was the journal. Plants produce many volatile metabolites. A small subset of these compounds are sensed by animals and humans, and the volatile profiles are defining elements of the distinct flavors of individual foods. Right? So plants produce these compounds, and there's certain ones of these that we can sense, and those ones that we can sense actually tend to, they translate into these certain flavors. Flavor volatiles are derived from an array of nutrients, including amino acids, fatty acids, and carotenoids. And tomato, for example, almost all of the important flavor-related volatiles are derived from essential nutrients. The predominance of volatiles derived from essential nutrients and health-promoting compounds suggests that these volatiles provide important information about the nutritional makeup of food. So I know that's a big mouthful, but it's just drawing that line and showing us that, we are this finely tuned instrument, and we can seek out and identify the things that we need. And we do it through our senses. We do it through our sense of smell. We do it through our sense of sight and our sense of taste and touch. And these things, a lot of times people just think of them as such base, they're so basic. Oh, those are just your senses. We need to know what a lab study shows you, in this test that measures this and that. But we also can measure, we can measure with our own senses. And it's just pretty awesome. So that's enough of secondary metabolites. I am going to move now into just kind of as an example of these concepts we've just been talking about: seasonality, local, energetics, senses, tastes, colors, all of that. I'm going to kind of give an example here with the summer kitchen, because we are in summertime. and it is hot. So here are some members of my family going berry picking out in Oregon, where my mom is from. It's a great thing to do in the summer because berries are full of antioxidants and they're juicy and cooling. So summer is associated with the element of fire in lots of traditions. Also, pragmatically, we can feel the fire because the sun is out and it is bright. Summer is the height of the sun. Summer energetics are about expansion, growth, light, activity, socializing, and creativity. Too much heat, though, like as cool as summer is and beautiful and flourishing, too much heat can raise our blood pressure. It can bring increased inflammation. It can bring agitation, so emotional agitation. Summer droughts can mean less water that's available to help cool us down, so we can get dehydrated. That can, lead to headaches, confused thinking, depression, anxiety. Fires. There's fires burning now, again, down in the Mediterranean, out west in America, always every summer bring the fires. This can be very damaging. I mean, there's some seeds that actually only like to sprout after they've been burned, so go them. But it can also be damaging, and it can really mess with air quality if it's out of control fires. And so that can bring respiratory stress. And, as we deal with this global warming and this climate change, we are going to have to be able to be better and better at dealing with these pressures. So it becomes really important that we learn to kind of handle these energetics and support ourselves in a daily way. So there's a lot of things that we can do, right? We don't have to wait till we are way overheated and our blood pressure's through the roof and we're totally agitated. There's things that we can do just as summer starts to come around to just be able to live in a way that's going to allow us to deal with those stresses. So, summer being hot and dry, we want to cool and we want to moisten. So we're going to do cooling foods and herbs. We're going to do moistening foods and herbs, bitter foods and herbs, because bitter is also a cooling flavor, and anti-inflammatory and antioxidant food and herbs, and then cardiotonics, right, to support that cardio system. So here is just a list, and there is a whole handout on the summer recipes on the website, and I'll make sure that that is in your resources so you don't have to scramble to try to write all this stuff down. But you want to think about just making your regular diet include cooling fruits and vegetables. So melons, pineapple, salad greens, celery, avocado, coconut. I mean, so many things, juicy berries, different kinds of cooling foods like yogurt or tofu. Barley is cooling, millet is cooling, mung beans. And then because I love sauce, cooling sauces. So herbal pestos, things like tzatziki that has got, yogurt in it, and dill and other cooling herbs. And then speaking of herbs, here's a list of cooling herbs. So, just working this into your food, working this into your herbal teas, things like basil, cilantro, dill, dandelion root, rose petals are so lovely and cooling, chamomile, hibiscus, which I am actually drinking today. I made myself a big thing of cooling summer tea because of the heat wave we're having. Lemon verbena, mint, lemon balm. I mean, these are just some. There's definitely a much longer list for sure. Also, some herbs might not be initially cooling, but their secondary effect would be cooling. So I've listed ginger and chili here as great examples. I mean, as we all know, ginger and chili grows in very hot regions, and that's because they also can help you cool down. So even if it kind of raises your temperature for a second because they're spicy and pungent, you break a sweat, and then that evaporative cooling mechanism kicks in, right? So sweat is a way that we cool our bodies because that evaporation effect can really help lower body temperature. And there, actually, I just stuck this into the slide presentation just before we started. That is the sun tea that I made today. It's got hibiscus and a few other berries in it. And,